the home stretch. So we've finished all the Christology. That doesn't mean we can't keep on refreshing, but certainly in terms of input for today. When I was organising today with Frances some time back, she said about giving a talk on to encourage the Catechetics, and I thought, well, what about something on perseverance? So I came up with the topic perseverance on the front line, and I thought, so that's what this talk is about, and it's a very important quality because you are on the front line in a way that a lot of other parishioners aren't, and you're in an environment that sometimes is friendly and sometimes is unfriendly or potentially even hostile. And I don't mean hostile in terms of just active aggression, but hostile in the subtle kinds of ways. So anything to help along, I hope will be useful for you. But the word perseverance, I looked up the origin of the word, and so persevere and perseverantia from the Latin, but when you break it out, is through severity or through, so being able to go through severity, through hardship, is what enables you to be persevering. And perseverance as a quality is always something that is the result of an accumulated work. One point isn't perseverance, it's in fact the fruit, the result, the end result of a journey that you say, I have persevered through something. I have persevered for this or for that. And that's always good to keep in mind, which means therefore it's not something that you do at a particular moment that's going to cause you to grow in perseverance particularly in your work of faith as a catechist, but it's the work that you do over a long period of time. So, that being said, it's never the work of a moment, but there are certain things that decisive failures in a moment can also cause lack of perseverance. I want to say that as well. So it's the work that we do over a long period of time, but also there can be certain key moments where if we fail to do something, then in fact we put a huge obstacle. When I was on holidays, which is when the call came through, I was actually listening to a couple of really good audiobooks. And one of them was a business book called Great by Choice. And it's by fellow Jim Collins, and I had previously read a copy of his book, Good to Great, that sold 4 million copies. In fact, the organization that I worked for in America, the Fellowship of Catholic University Students, they would take business books, written by pagans and whatever, but they've analysed how businesses run, and then they take the sound business principles from them and apply them to evangelization. So how to fundraise, what do we do well, what don't we do well, and all of that. So this particular book seeks to build on the previous one, Good to Great. So this one is Great by Choice. And it's a study of companies where in a time of flux, in a time of difficulty, upheaval, things aren't going normal, many companies crash and burn. Others actually thrive and become amazing. One particular example, and he focuses on pretty much American companies, some of them just national, but others national and international as well. He looks at, say, what happened after, he looks at the company, I think, Northwest. And anyway, after the time of September 11, well, a lot of airlines were ready to shut down. There was a lot of fear about flying and so forth. Northwest apparently did not lose a day of flying. The following day, they were up in the air, they had meetings, they said, you know what, they can attack us, they can try and terrorize us, we are not going to be cowed. And that airline grew and grew and grew, and there's a whole lot of things that they did. So the choice or the course of the book is actually about extrapolating or extracting the principles, the choices that these companies made during a time of upheaval and hardship that caused them to flourish. And in fact, in the last chapter, chapter 8, he has a good section of the chapter dedicated to luck, by which he meant those unforeseen, he actually gives several criteria how he defines luck. but those criteria, those things that happen which are unforeseeable, out of your hand, but have a potential to change the direction of your company. And when I was preparing this talk, I thought, you know what? I think these principles are actually very helpful for what we do in the church and what you do as catechists. So I'm going to take you through step by step each of these principles. There are only three of them, three main principles. It's a triangle. And I'm going to write it up so that you can just follow me as we go. And then I'll give examples, what he says, and then examples that could apply for you as catechists. The handwriting is not part of the readings. Jim Collins and Morton somebody. I can give you the details. In fact, if any of you would like the audio book, I can send it to you. So I've got that, and I think it's a free trial for the first month. Now, fanatic, listen. Okay, this one was creative. Sorry. Empirical creativity, and then productive paranoia. Yeah, productive paranoia, PP, paranoia. I'll tell you what he means by it. So this is the triangle, and the book is all about the triangle. What this means, how to do it. What this means, how to do it, and what productive paranoia means and how to do it, and eventually how to do all three. And anyway, from their examination, this is a good thing. They want to study these results in these companies and go from the facts and then work backwards. And then they test their theory, and then they see if the theory has, in fact, needs to be tweaked. They tweak it, and then they develop their principles according to what they're seeing. So in other words, they're extracting their principles from what they've seen in practice, rather than trying to impose of what the practice should be. And some people spend their whole lives, whether in business or in the church, wanting to do things in the same old way that they've always done it. And you know what? You keep doing all that you've done, you will always get what you've ever gotten. And you will not. So it's just interesting. What can we learn from the study of a business book, Sound Business Principles? Just a little word about Focus. Focus started in 1998 in January in the US. Curtis Martin and Scott Hahn. Anyway, what's it now? 21 years old. Do you know in the 21-year history since Focus has been in, they run small group Bible studies. I was their national chaplain. So they had missionaries, recent college graduates. They would then form them intensely for about 5 or 6 weeks. They would then teach them how to do Bible studies in small groups up to about 8, and then one-to-one mentoring, which they call discipling. And the whole aim is to do spiritual multiplication. So one person disciples 2 others and teaches them how to disciple others. And then they will choose 2 each. And each year the idea is to keep on expanding. By the time you get to year number 33, guess what sort of sums you're getting? About 6 billion. It was the world population back then. Now each year these guys are having their conference. I just went out of curiosity. I was actually there doing something else for 18 months at the University of Illinois. And then I met these people and I thought, wow, these are stellar, beautiful, intelligent young people, motivated about their Catholic faith, and they're doing things with a very strategic methodology, but of course they've got the goods as well as human beings. And working them for them as a national chaplain and going with them on several hiring weekends, I learned how they interview, how they hire, and then how they discern the difficult cases, and so forth. In that time, Focus has sent, I think it's, if I'm not mistaken, something like 500, 600 young men to the seminary.
Wow.
21 years. I know, that should be saying,
Yeah, wow.
that is a bombshell. So, guys who've been involved in their Bible studies and then subsequently went on. I've known a number of guys who were missionaries then, now they're young priests, full of life, they believe the church's teachings, they're confident, they're articulate, they're not bombastic or show-offs, but they believe. And they've about 120, I think, women gone through religious life. Most of them have gone through, what do they call it, through the monastic orders. And I don't know how many marriages, but, just many, many, many really good marriages. They had a thing called a dating policy. And I ended up writing a dating policy because I know with my vast experience, there should be a laughing point there. But about 2/3 or 3/4 of the spiritual direction cases were always about the dating policy, So I learnt a lot, secondhand, but I learnt a lot about the dating policy and about dating as well. So anyway, so I ended up doing a lot of that. But it's interesting, the idea of taking a step back. If you are, like if someone comes in, they're courting somebody, and the idea is to take a step back from the relationship, not to kill it in that first year. So if I'm, for instance, speaking to somebody every day and I see them once a week, then okay, it might be that I'll see them once a week, but I'm only going to speak to them twice a week, not every day. So there's a sacrifice involved. And the purpose of that was to enable them to work more freely in their work and to discern their own vocation and also to dedicate themselves to prayer. Interesting, during the lunch break we were talking about the pros and cons of celibacy for priests. There is a theological reality, but there's also a very practical one. If you've got a married wife and children, then in terms of your availability for meetings at night, 2 or 3 nights a week, I think your wife and children start to get upset.
Yeah.
That we want dad home. Where is he? What's the story? So there are practical things there. And we found that in the dating policy, it typically decided by the end of that year, it's either set them on the road to marriage because they realized their relationship was serious and genuine, or they went in different directions. Very interesting. We used to urge them to communicate not so much by email and all of that, which they certainly could, but handwritten letters. What was that? Not to be chivalrous and go back to Elizabethan or Dickensian times, but to, when you're writing a letter, there's a sacrifice involved. And as you're, formulating your words, you are actually pouring yourself out. And there's a sense, you go to the post office and you mail the letter, and then you wait back for a response. So it's not instantaneous. And there's so much to be learnt in relationships of this sort by waiting, putting yourself out, receiving, reading, and a written letter, you can always reread it and all of that. So we did a whole lot of these things, but I'm just saying the fruits of it. It's about 600 or so seminarians, and if they didn't continue after the first year, they usually took them off their statistics. So many guys would leave the seminary after the first year, and that's fair enough, it's to be expected. But they stayed on after that, they would keep them on their records. Then they would have these conferences, and I joined them, I think, at about I joined them in 2004, so in their 6th year. They had just gone from 40 missionaries to about 65. They were growing using a business principle at 50% per annum.
Wow.
Now you think of a business that's growing 50% per annum. Where did they get their wisdom? They were using sound business principles and applying them. So we're not making cartridges for a photocopier. We are producing students who are alive in Jesus Christ for the Catholic faith. Good. How are we going to do that? We need a source of funding. Boom. We have to do that. So they would draw their principles. Now, the conferences then they would have after the year number 7, they deliberately slowed down to 25% per annum growth. A lot of businesses at the 7-year mark crash and burn if they keep on expanding quicker than the infrastructure can actually expand. Now, so the church is 2,000 years old, right? A lot of infrastructure, but where can we apply these principles? And I'll get to the ones for you as catechists. And then they would have these conferences. And when I went to a conference in 2008, so their 10-year mark, there were 4,000 young people at their conference. Now they've got conferences regularly, 10,000 or more university students are turning up. Now, to find a place that can host 10,000 people, the Wollongong Entertainment Centre takes only 6,000.
Oh, wow.
Okay? So, to find a place, a conference centre, but it's doable, is what I'm saying. And it is actually happening. So, there's a lot of wisdom to be taken from learning from business world, business models, extracting the principles, and without compromising the doctrine, applying them. So in Good to Great, we studied those principles, and there were different companies. In Great by Choice, we're studying the companies that flourished in a time of upheaval and uncertainty. One of the things that the authors make in Great by Choice is that if there's anything certain about the future of the world, is that the future will not become more and more tranquil, but more and more tumultuous, unpredictable. Whether a financial crisis happens, a terrorist attack happens that just shakes people's confidence, a war breaks out, whether a major earthquake kills umpteen million people. All things that we cannot foresee. And yet, as human beings, we've got to respond to them, and we've got a mission to do. Businesses, in terms of business, we, in terms of evangelizing and making disciples for Christ. What's the last instructions Jesus leaves us before he ascended into heaven? Go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. That's what we've got to do. Make disciples and baptizing. Yes, question?
Could I please have the name of the people who started this wonderful thing?
Yeah, focusonline.org. Just focusonline.org is their domain name. Curtis Martin. He's the president. He's the main guy, but they launched it together on EWTN, and Mother Angelica, God rest her soul, was alive still then. And
Marcus who?
Curtis Martin.
Oh.
Curtis. Curtis Martin. And Curtis has married to beautiful Michael Ann, and I think they've got 10, 11 children.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, amazing family. Not everyone's called to have that many children, but they were, and it's beautiful. And Scott Hahn, you've heard of Scott Hahn, so the biblical theologian. And but anyway, focusonline.org, all one word. I'll write it up. And focus. Focusonline.org. So anyway, and what I loved about working at their headquarters was that this is an organization that at that point, I hope it's still the same, had not forgotten the reason why headquarters exists. As the understanding was then, so my role as chaplain was to offer pastoral care for the people at headquarters, and then to visit the different missionaries on the ground, the different teams. At that time, teams of 4 at least, 2 men, 2 women, and then maintain good relations with the priests and the bishops of the various dioceses. The purpose of the executive of the headquarters was always to be of service to the people on the campus. That's why it exists. Unfortunately, when an organization grows bigger, typically that insight is forgotten. And they think that their headquarters exists for, the people on the ground exist for the headquarters. And it's about big noting yourself and looking good with the president or whoever, bishop in the case of the church structure, whatever it happens to be. So, in the case now, Great by Choice, they looked at various companies and saw what they came up with. And fanatic discipline, empirical creativity, and productive paranoia were the three key ingredients that were so important in the leaders of these companies. Let's take the first one. Fanatic discipline. Fanatic discipline means just that the leaders of those companies or of the organization, whatever it happens to be, are absolutely disciplined in doing the things that they have to do and to do them well. He uses an example of, and with each company that succeeded and thrived, he always had a runner-up company under similar circumstances that didn't flourish. And he would look at what one company did well to cause it to flourish and what the other one did not do. He looked at the expedition to the South Pole. There was Captain Scott from England who was going to the South Pole, and then there was Roald Amundsen from Norway, the Norwegian explorer. And anyway, Amundsen, who ended up going to the South Pole and making it there and coming back, he trained meticulously for that expedition, whereas Scott relied so much on his machinery, which had never been tested at -40. And then they freeze and they don't work. Amundsen, on the other hand, had husky dogs to do that, because they had been tested. He had tested himself on things like eating blubber and a whole lot of other food that you could only get when you are in a place like the South Pole. Your own, whatever, canned food or whatever they had wasn't necessarily going to cut it. And a whole lot of other things. But one of the points that they did was that they were going to have, I think he set himself to do 15 or 20 miles every day. He's going to march that distance, day in, day out. Now, what does this mean? It means that, do they always get a 20-mile march in there? No, not every day. Sometimes the wind is against you, and you only get 5 miles in. But you've done 5 miles. Other days the weather is splendid, and you can do 25, or even more. But you put a limit. Because, and by doing it regularly, consistently, you actually make more ground in the long term than you do by, it's a great day, great weather, I'm going to do 40 miles today. Yeah, but I do 40 miles today, that wears me out. I'll need 2 days to recover from that. The next day, I'm not going to be in any position to do another 40 miles. Even if it is great weather, I'll need to rest. So it's, you see the brains in all of this, how it actually does apply to what we do as catechists, or I do as a priest. So the idea is you keep on doing it consistently. And then in your case as catechists, well, that means you're rigorous with yourself. That each week you've got the normal things that you know you need to do. Prepare your lessons. Research them thoroughly. I don't know what else you have to do. Obviously, turn up so you can make maximum use of your time. The preparation, reading around the faith, having a target. You'll have different targets that you want to reach. You might know there's a child there who's particularly naughty or particularly needy, so you've got to be prepared for them. You have someone there who might just, has asked you a question from the previous week. You need to be ready with their answer there. Because they've trusted you the previous week. They've asked you something, and if you come back, you say, I am interested in you. You help to spark that interest. But doing it week in, week out, term in, term out, the fanatic discipline will in the long run give you better results. If you don't do that, you go up and down according to your mood swings. And I'm not saying I always do this, right? I say these things to myself. It's amazing how far you go in the long run. So, and obviously the regularity of turning up each week. There could be other things too that you would throw in there yourselves about what this fanatic discipline looks like, but the basic line of it is, or the long and short of it is, that you are consistent in what you do. And put a limit also. So don't think just because you can do a 40-mile walk or 40-kilometre walk on a particular day because it's good weather, that you should do that. No. Measure yourself. In the long run, it works much better. Empirical, then, creativity. So we go down to the bottom line of the triangle. What's that all about? Empirical creativity means be prepared to try new things. You're all given instructions about how to teach. You were presumably taught by other catechists, and they have shared with you what they've done, what they found helpful or not. But you will also have your own ideas. You'll have your own thoughts about how to do things. And this is why, for instance, from time to time, textbooks will be changed, should be updated or supplemented. Not because they're bad, but because they don't speak as well to the time that we're living in. And, I'm not saying rebel against the CCD and Wollongong, right? Don't do that. But what I'm saying is those things will evolve. And they should evolve. It's like theological doctrine. Theological doctrine develops. And the church has a beautiful tradition in the development of doctrine. And the difference between authentic development and inauthentic development is when you've got authentic development of doctrine is that the doctrine itself has been further explained while remaining within its own internal logic. Whereas inauthentic doctrinal development is when you now go outside of that line of doctrine and you either leave a part of it aside or you head in a direction that is actually not in continuity with its own internal logic. This is what happened during the time of the Reformation. Certain reformers were saying, this is a problem, so let's pick an issue. Issue of selling of indulgences. That was bad. They had a real point about that. And they wanted to resist it. So how did they resist it? They threw out indulgences altogether. But that wasn't actually the problem. The problem was the selling of indulgences. That I can somehow buy my own salvation. No, I cannot. Salvation comes to me as a free gift from Christ if and when I repent. Without repentance, there's no mercy. I cannot be forgiven because I don't think I have anything for which to be forgiven. So, the reformers then threw out the baby with the bathwater. But indulgences, genuinely sought from the treasury of the church, because of the infinite merits of Christ, in humble repentance, that is genuine. But in throwing out the baby with the bathwater, they broke the line and said, no, there's no indulgences are basically a bad thing. Full stop. The saints, on the other hand, really wanted to reform. They stayed inside the church. They suffered like crazy, right? As the saints do. But they're the real reformers in the history of the church. And they often suffer at the hands of leaders in the church. Our own St. Mary MacKillop had her own woes to tell. But you know what? God bless her, and this is what makes her a saint. She was always very respectful of the bishop at that time. She never thought, even though he was in the wrong, she never thought, because he represented the apostles. Unworthily, but she respected him. I thought, wow, that takes courage. But the saints are the light for us in this way. Another thing, for instance, the doctrine about salvation through works. You know, there's no salvation, it's not by works, it's by faith. That's what Martin Luther said. Now, is that true? Well, faith is necessary. But as St. James tells us, faith without good works is dead. How do I know I've got faith if it never flows forth in works of charity? On the other hand, the person who works charitable works is showing you their faith by their works. And this is simple in plain English in St. James's letter. Or the one last one, sola fide, faith alone. So, and that's an error of the Reformers and Martin Luther in particular. Now, faith is necessary, but not faith alone. Why? Because he wanted to argue against those who thought they could somehow earn their own salvation by doing good deeds in the Pharisaic kind of way. And remember, Jesus has a lot to say about that. Don't be like the hypocrites who say their prayers on the street corners, blah, 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 who give alms and let everybody know so they can, or who like to wear long robes, and I just wear a coat, but wear long robes and broad phylacteries and being called rabbi and treated obsequiously in the night. They have had their reward. On the other hand, when you give alms, do not know what your left hand is doing. The left hand mustn't know what your right is doing. When you pray, go in that secret place. He's not saying that nobody can see you praying. He's saying, let it be genuine. And we have the gospel every Ash Wednesday. Every Ash Wednesday. Okay, so genuine development of doctrine is always a development within itself. And this can indeed develop, and has over the centuries of the church. But it's got to be authentic. And who knows, maybe next year's plenary council might actually lead to some of that. So, empirical creativity, it means we need to be creative. But what we're being creative with has to be consistent and faithful to the doctrine that we have been assigned by the Lord to teach. The moment we start veering away from that doctrine, for whatever reason, because it's too hard, because it's uncomfortable, because we don't want to get ourselves in trouble, it's unpopular, those reasons, then we have stopped being faithful to Christ. And now it's no longer genuine creativity. Why do the Morton and Collins, Jim Collins and Morton, I forget the surname, why do they call it empirical creativity? It means because they want it to be adapted and adjusted according to what you are seeing on the ground. You all know your own situations on the ground. Some of you will have larger classes than others. So that actually puts a limit to what you can do with the children. Others will have smaller classes, which means that you can have a bit more of a conversation as you carry out the particular work. I know one catechist, who brings a musical instrument into the class where she's able to play a guitar, and she uses those songs instead of an actual CD player. But if you can't play an instrument, okay, well you can't do that obviously. But you've got to think in your creativity based on what works on the ground. How do you know what works on the ground? Well, you don't go out and buy a $300 guitar, assuming you can play a guitar, a $300 guitar or $500 guitar, unless you've tested that the guitar technique is going to work in transmitting the faith to your children. You start off with something small. And this is why these two authors in Great by Choice say, start off by firing bullets, then cannonball fires, or then cannonballs. Start off firing bullets. You find many little bullets. The way these companies test their market is, okay, we think there's a niche for earphones. Okay, so we're going to shoot a lot of bullets there. We're going to invest a little bit of money, a little bit of infrastructure to see if there's a market for earphones. And no, nothing happened. Okay, great. We haven't lost a lot. There might be a niche for little, transistors or a different kind of iPod. We'll try that. Oh, now there's a bit of interest. Okay, so we've fired another bullet and we've gotten some positive results. Let's tweak this iPod a bit so it makes it work with a whole lot of other things, with Androids and with whatever, and with Apples and everything else. Okay, now it's got wider application. We're getting even better feedback. And so we're responding to that. Once then you know that you've onto something that works, you stop firing little bullets and you now fire cannonballs, which means you put more money into things, more resources, more time, more effort, and you make something big, but now you're shooting into what you know is going to work. When you come to your own classrooms, again, you have to test what works and doesn't work with your children. And you have to see the atmosphere in the school. You have to develop the relationship with the headmaster, the tempo there. And some are interested and some are not. But you've got to work within your particular market. And that is essential. The attitude of the teachers. Are any of you accompanied by a teacher, or the teacher leaves you alone? Okay. See, and again, it varies from school to school. Obviously, you've got your own abilities and limitations, and you know those. But seeing what that, the situation is, what you can do, test the waters. Test the waters. And as you pray about things and ask the Lord to inspire you, how can I be a more effective teacher in my teaching? And ideas come to you, then let's test them. If they're from God, they will be fruitful. As you fire the bullets, they will come back with results. And then you can expand and do something a bit more substantial. Another thing that they do in this book is the importance of good leaders of these big companies that succeed in times of upheaval and in chaos, is they zoom in and zoom out and then zoom in again. When things are in turmoil, we can tend to think, oh my goodness, my world is falling apart. That particular part of the world is falling apart. By zooming out, it looks smaller now from where I'm standing. I realise what I've done before is actually very, very good, and I think we can continue being very good, but there's a blip here. And I have to see whether this has been something caused by something recent that I've done, or just a bump in the road that I just came over and I didn't see. So it should pass. Therefore, it's no cause to be worried about. But you only get that by zooming out and then zooming back in. It's very important for our perspective, and particularly your perspective as a catechist. So to see, for instance, a new principal might come to the school. Well, that's okay, so that's changing things. A parent has made a complaint, but they won't be upfront about it and come and talk to me. But they're just grumbling. So I've got to work out how to nip that in the bud. But I discover that by zooming out and zooming back in. It's a very important practice. On the one hand, don't be too hasty in trying things too quickly. On the other hand, don't be too quick to change things before you have given them a good go. You don't know whether something works or not until it's really had a bit of chance to work. So the empirical creativity, shoot bullets and then fire bullets and then cannonballs. So test the waters, see what gets a result, and then seek to invest more resources accordingly. Any questions on there? Okay, we're ripping through this book. It's great. But anyway, you'll apply it in your own way. Productive paranoia, the third part of the triangle. What's productive paranoia? Well, it's not about living as in a paranoid fashion. It isn't about that. But amazingly, the leaders of these great companies that have been very, very effective in times of turmoil, they have been leading above the death line, basically. What that means is that they are never casual about their leadership. They never think, what, we're doing really well, no problem. I say to my soul, you have had a great harvest, many things for years to come. Eat, drink, merry, have a good time, blah, blah, blah. Full this night, the demand will be made for your soul. They're never that type of leader. On the contrary, they're always looking out for what can go wrong. This is the paranoia. But paranoids are paranoid for no reason at all. Regardless, they're just paranoid because that's the psychosis. The productive paranoia that great by choice is going on about is trying to say, look for what can go wrong and why you think it can go wrong. Look around corners. Anticipate problem. Gosh, you're always so negative. That's what you might be told. Say, it's precisely because I think of what can go wrong and try and put checkpoints in place or checks in place that when it does go wrong, I'm ready for it. You know, when I was leading my first pilgrimage, I was very mistrusting of everybody else who was on there with me. And so I never wanted to leave things by chance. And it served me very well. Because if I had to lead a group somewhere and I didn't know, I had not done it before, I will do the walk myself. So that the next day, I know where we're going, turn left here, turn right there. Oh, how do you know? Yeah, because I've done it. Don't leave things to guesswork. Don't leave things to chance. Because sometimes the luck of the draw will fall in your favour, other times it will go against you. And in their examination of the whole question of luck, they were saying that both the successful companies and the failure companies had luck. In fact, the failure companies on average had more luck events than the successful ones. But the successful ones knew what to make of their opportunities when they came. The others squandered the opportunity. So when you get a breakthrough in the school or in your teaching or something happens, don't say, oh, fantastic, isn't that nice? No! Say, this is an opportunity moment. What can I do to double the number of children coming to my classes? Right? We want to expand. We want to win people for Christ. We want to evangelize. And so the more kids in your classroom, the more kids are going to be evangelized, more kids are going to hear about Jesus, the more kids who will make their sacraments, the more kids who will leave primary school with a positive attitude towards the church. You are changing society a little bit at a time because you take the opportunity. So, the productive paranoid leader doesn't sleep on the job and realizes that they have to look at what could go wrong, because sometimes it will. And if you sleep on it, then it won't, you'll miss the opportunities. Keeping in mind also that your success does not depend on your captain. Very often, you know, if we're not in the leadership role, maybe in that, I don't know how you break yourselves up in terms of each school, but to say, well, this is what we're being told to do. You know what? True, you've been told to do that. But on the ground, guess who is right? You, the ones on the ground, is right unless otherwise proven so. What am I suggesting to you? That you're a rebel, that you be like that? No. Use your best judgment all the time. If you're not sure of something, ask questions. Answers exist. And a lot of answers exist, even most. But don't do or not do something because you haven't been told you can or can't do it. If you and your initiative think, you know what, this is worth trying, I'm going to give it a shot. Don't be foolish, be prudent, but take calculated risks and do it. See what happens. If you ask, and here I'm pinching something from another favourite leadership philosophy of mine, Colin Powell, the former Secretary of State. Brilliant leadership wisdom he has. And one of them he says, you don't know what you can get away with until you try. And he again wasn't saying be a rebel, be a whatever, but he said there are some people who go around and they've constantly got to ask the person above them or someone else in the chain, can I do this? Because they lack the confidence. I assure you, and Colin Powell assures you, that you go far enough above the chain and up in the chain, sooner or later you will come across someone who thinks their duty is to say no. They have no idea why they're saying no, And they're middle-level management who shouldn't be there because they're dead wood. But they're there. And you ask them for advice and they'll say no. Guess what? Similar things exist in the church. Similar things exist in the church. People will think, oh no, I don't think we should do that. That's a bit, I think Father, really? Oh, okay. So I realise I don't ask that person again in the future. You know, and I just go ahead. And then if something goes wrong, I'm sorry, it was a mistake, it was a bit rash. Okay, I won't do it again. But many times it works out right.
Forgiveness is easy to get from permission.
It's easier to ask pardon than to seek permission. So,
Centrelink is full of people who took risks like you've been talking about.
Yes.
And lost their jobs.
And lost their jobs, you know. And hang on, the ones who usually retain their jobs don't take the risks. The ones they might get fired, you know. Typically, it's true. Some people would, and that's why it's safer to not use your initiative. It's safer to be dead wood. Inside, you'll feel miserable and unhappy because you're actually not working to your full potential. But the ones who are, in fact, using their initiative and actually can test it, you know. And I'm going to say, don't take silly risks, but take enough risks. Because if you just do what everyone has said you should do, then that's you will just get what we've always been getting. Okay, I'm nearly finished. So pray, a little quote. It's attributed to St. Ignatius Loyola, but there's actually no evidence for it. But it's a great saying because it does pick up the Ignatian spirit. Pray as if everything depends on you, and work as if everything depends on God. So when you're praying, tell God there's an urgency. I need you to do something. You have to do something here, or I can't succeed. If you don't give the grace, I don't go anywhere. But when I'm working, everything depends on God. So work hard. Work with all your energy, but with peace. And if I can't see the fruits of my work, then that's okay. That doesn't mean it's gone. You know, that God will let me see certain things. Share encouraging stories with one another. The zooming out and zooming back in. When you share stories with each other, it helps to build up confidence and maintain your own perspectives. Savour your successes. Enjoy them. They are God's gifts to you. God is allowing you to share the fruit. The disciples come back. Lord, even the devils submit to us when we use your name. And when we cast out demons in your name. And Jesus says, I saw Satan fall like lightning. Jesus must have got a kick to see the 72 disciples come back, excited to have now tasted for the first time the joy of evangelizing and winning disciples for him. Don't measure your fruit, I've said that already, only by what you can see. Evangelization is partly empirical and partly mysterious. Perseverance is the result of staying at something in difficult times. Perseverance is in easy times is not worthy of the name. Okay? And remember, it is Christ who is sending you out in his name. You're on the winning team. God bless you.
Thank you.
Any quick questions? We're right on 2:30, so I know you've got to go. Any quick questions? Maybe one or two? Great.